Well, I'm glad to have our guest today, someone who has been all over the world recently, making headlines and making cultural impact, I would say. He's a former CIA analyst and the proprietor of Sonar21.com, where you can find his commentary daily. Larry Johnson. How you doing, Larry?
I am well, David. You've upgraded yourself. I used to deal with you when you were only radio.
Yeah, yeah,
Now you're
exactly.
video too. You're all
Yeah.
grown up.
Video killed the radio star, right?
Yeah.
So I saw your post on your website, sonar21.com. This was posted just 3 days ago as of the recording today. Tucker Carlson's interview with Steve Witkoff reveals
Mhm.
surprising ignorance.
Right.
And you were talking about, this recent Tucker Carlson appearance with the individual who Trump has picked as his emissary for negotiating peace between Ukraine and Russia, as well as the Middle East situation with Israel and Gaza. And first of all, I just want to get your overall take on that exchange and what we learned about Steve Witkoff, because that was the first time a lot of us had ever seen anything about
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was an important interview. And by talking about the ignorance of Witkoff, it's not intended as an ad hominem attack at all. I think Witkoff comes off as he's an intelligent, clearly a man of superior intelligence. His experience has been in the world of law and real estate in New York City, and I'm sure he's quite competent in those areas. But what struck me was sort of what he revealed about what he didn't know, and almost the if you will, the lack of critical thinking skills on his part when it comes to issues, particularly with respect to Israel. Uh, One of the first things that jumped out at me, or well, actually, when you watch the whole interview, towards the end of the interview with Tucker, he's talking about the importance of communication, that, you've got to be able to talk to both sides. And I'm, saying, yeah, amen, I agree with that. Except early on in the interview, when Tucker was asking him about dealing with Hamas, he goes, oh, I haven't talked to them, haven't had any direct contact with them. We only go through an intermediary. So right up front, he contradicts what is perhaps one of his more important points later on in the interview. It became clear from his discussion about the situation with Hamas that he has been completely captured by the Zionist the mentality, the point of view. He was shown this ridiculous propaganda video that Israel has put together that, claiming that the Hamas fighters were engaged with mass rape. He didn't say anything about the beheaded babies, but my understanding is beheaded babies is also in that video. That's a lie. You know, Anybody says, well, how can you say Hamas didn't behead babies? Very easy. Give me the name of one, just one. Give me the name of one baby that Hamas beheaded. You can't, because it didn't happen. And the same thing with the mass rape of Israeli women. That's just that old racist trope that used to be, here in the United States, the what I call the mandingo. The black man is a raping the white woman. And, we got racial pure, it's that kind of racist nonsense that's being perpetrated by the Israelis. And Witkoff bought into it all. Also, in the discussion with Tucker, he made the following statement with respect to Iran, that Iran doesn't have any air defense. It's been decimated. Again, Israeli talking points. It's nonsense. It's not true, but they really believe that. They genuinely believe that. And when you believe something that's false, it's like if you believe that you can jump off an 80-story building with no parachute and you're going to land just fine, yeah, you can believe that all you want. And then when you put your belief into action, what happens? Gravity takes over and you splatter
Yeah.
and you don't walk away. You're dead. Well, that's sort of what's going on with these kinds of assumptions. So it's also that Witkoff reflected an ignorance about what the origin of this conflict was. He's pretending that, these here's the Israeli, they're just walking along minding their own business, and these nasty Palestinian thugs from Hamas jumped out of nowhere and attacked us for no good reason. That's a lie. I've taken the time using public sources, and particularly the numbers for the number of attacks that Palestinians have carried out on Israelis since August of 2000 until today. It's the Israeli Foreign Ministry has the numbers posted. And when you count in the attack on October 7th, 2023, and assign all of the casualties there, the KIA to Palestine and to Hamas, even though Hamas did not do the majority of it, you come up with a total of 2,755 Israelis have been killed by Palestinian violence in the last 25 years. I'll repeat that number, 2,755. That does not make them the worst terrorist group in the world. They don't even qualify for third tier. Think of it. Al-Qaeda killed almost 3,000 Americans or more on 9/11 in one day. And we're talking 25 years. Whereas when you look at what Israel has done to the Palestinians, right now, as of last Sunday, the death toll for Palestinians stands at well over 60,000. Yeah. Those are the public sources. Others believe that as many as 200,000 are dead, buried under the rubble. So, Witkoff displayed no understanding or appreciation of that history, or the fact that the ultra religious zealots, the true Zionists in Israel, are intent upon destroying and physically eliminating the Palestinians from Gaza, because they view that land as theirs. God gave us this land, therefore we get to keep it. Yeah. So that was on the Palestinian side. On the Russian side, Witkoff showed more. He was more sensible about the need to deal with Russia. Yeah. But again, ignorance on some critical elements. He couldn't name the 4 oblasts that Russia incorporated into its federation: Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk. He said, like the Donbass, and I don't remember the other 2, and Crimea. Yeah. Well, Crimea had been incorporated into Russia back in 2014. So simple things like that. It is not understanding what is the Russian position that Putin laid out in June of 2024 to the Russian Foreign Ministry as far as Russia's terms for ending the war. Witkoff did not seem to be up to speed on that. So, like I said, nice guy. He's got Donald Trump trusts him, but he showed a remarkable amount of ignorance about some of these things. And hell, let's say he still had a 9 to 10 hour flight going over there. He could have read up on some of this stuff when he traveled to Russia.
The thing that irritated me, that stuck out, I had to stop watching it at some point, is because he said, well, I think we just, and I don't have an issue with him personally. I'm just tired of this being the best we could do, after all of this, which is this idea that, he says, well, we need to, there's a lot of potential in the region, in referring to if we can, make sure that Iran just can't have nukes, and then if we can work out a deal with them and the other players around Gaza. He said, and he made a point. He said, we've got to bring finance. If we could bring some finance into the region. And I thought, man, that's the big thing. That he buried the lead about what this is all about.
Yeah.
It's always been about that. If we could get finance, people to play ball with the global financial players and all of its little friendly oligarchic corporations and everything else that goes with that. If you could just play ball with this, we could make a deal. And I just don't think it's worth it anymore.
Well, he was insisting that Hamas would have to, quote, disarm. Yeah. And again, this showed the ignorance of history. Hamas emerged in 1987. And shortly after it became a functioning organization, it was in opposition to the Palestinian liberation organization, the Palestinian Authority, because they felt legitimately so that they had sold out to the Israeli, the Zionist interests.
Yeah.
Well, who was financing Hamas for
Israel.
years?
Yeah.
The Israelis, Mossad, financing it. So when Witkoff wants to complain about the fact that Hamas is armed, quote, has to disarm, it got those arms in part because of Israeli support, because the Israelis wanted to create an alternative force to the Palestinian Authority
Yeah.
so that there would never be an actual agreement on a two-state solution. They would give lip service. Oh, yeah, we're in favor of the two-state, but these damn Palestinians, they won't stop fighting each other.
Yeah.
Well, you know why they won't stop fighting each other? Because we're funding them to fight each other.
Right.
That's cynical, and he doesn't understand that. So he sort of glossed over the religious fanaticism that underlines Israel's claim to that land.
Right.
I've got a very, it's not a widely accepted view, but the fact of the matter is the promises made to the Jews that are recorded in the Torah and the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament. Those were written by Jews who were held captive in Babylon after the Babylonians invaded them and tore down the first temple. So it's a book written by Jews from the perspective of Jews for Jews. And so here we are, and in their recording of it, hey, God gave all this land to you. We say so. Now, I know that there's some who deeply believe that those are words from God. Okay, you can believe that. I don't. But what I do object to is here we are 2,500 years later, and people are taking those words that were written, almost 3 millennia ago, and using it to justify killing Palestinians today, that they can exterminate them. And I can show you videos of Orthodox rabbis in Israel saying that they've got the right, that these people shouldn't exist, that we need to destroy them because it says so in the Pentateuch. And it's like, guys, we got to get off that. If this is sort of, I don't mean to take this off in a religious direction, but if all Christians, if all Jews, and if all Palestinians or all Muslims really believe that man, male and female, are created in the image of God,
Yeah,
that means all people,
yeah.
Not just the Jews, not just the Christians, all people are created and reflect the image of God. And in a way, that was sort of the message that Jesus brought, that, God dwells within each and every one. Whether you choose to recognize that or not is a whole nother thing. But once you recognize it, it changes how you should be viewing other people, because you're dealing with other expressions of God.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody reflects the positive characteristics that we believe that at least we're taught by Jesus about the nature of God. But it ain't about killing.
Yeah.
It was about love and forgiveness and
You
healing.
you mentioned it, so I pulled it up. Galatians 3:16, Paul says that the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. Scripture does not say and to seeds, meaning many people, but and to your seed, meaning one person who is Christ, right? So, and then he says that Christ, as this new heir of this seed, of this promise, is a universal claim for the whole
Yeah.
world, so
Right.
that every human being would be now the temple of God, right? So
Right.
that's the whole point of if any basic high school level literary analysis of what's going on here would understand the kind of motifs that Paul's dealing with and the whole New Testament's dealing with, when you have especially Jesus saying over and over again, Israel turn from your way. You cannot. It's kind of ironic given the context of what you're talking about in current times, but the people of their time, they want to have a violent revolution. So they had their equivalent of the Palestinian Authority in their mind, who was the sellouts. That was the Sadducees, who were in league with the Roman occupiers, and then they had the zealots, who were wanting to have a violent revolution to overthrow the occupiers. I guess
Right.
that would be directionally equivalent to Hamas. And Jesus is in the middle of that, and he's saying this is not going to work either way. Okay, because the more you try to have violent revenge against Rome, they're going to come down harder on you, and they're going to stomp you out. And that's exactly what he predicted would happen in 70 A.D. when Rome sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple.
Right.
The whole
Right.
point of the Bible there is just to put this from an anthropological perspective. This is what we do on our show, is that God raises Jesus's temple, which is a symbol of the human person.
Right.
He doesn't raise the national temple, which is a way of saying we're not going to be ethno-narcissists moving forward. We're going to be human person centered, right? And
Right.
that's why the Christian movement created hospitals where everybody was welcome. That's why we have this focus on the individual rights of man wherever the Christian
Right.
story has gone, right? And so
Right.
so that's the move there that begins in that nexus point, that we're not going to be, well, everybody's equal, but we're a little bit more superior. That's not the Christian reality that the West built a lot of its legal and ethical and war doctrines around, even though it doesn't live up to it, of course. The standard we have is that the human person is sacred. And so you can't say,
Yes.
well, because your ethnicity, we can blow up your town. And they always use that whole thing, Larry, and you know this, that, well, they are always hiding around kids. But as we just saw, I mean, it's a little bit different, but with that strike with the signal text release, and they're striking some apartment complex because a guy who works on missiles went to visit his girlfriend.
He went to visit.
Oh, so he's
girlfriend.
hiding because he's going to check on his girlfriend, and you blow up the whole apartment complex.
Yeah,
So that's human shields. Bull crap.
Yeah.
Bull
No,
crap. And that's what they're using all the time. That same line in Gaza.
It's really, I would describe it as demonic.
Yeah.
I'm also a firearms instructor, and I train instructors, and I teach self-defense for concealed carry. But the critical thing in that is the only time you would ever use a firearm to kill somebody is if that person was in fact threatening to kill you, represented a direct threat for, to either kill you or cause a serious bodily harm, or was threatening someone else to inflict the same. And what I teach is that the very, 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 very last thing you ever want to do is have to shoot somebody. If you've got an alternative to walk away, then walk away. If you've got a possibility to disengage, disengage. It's only if you absolutely have no choice that you want to take a life. And, frankly, I think that ought to be our foreign policy. And instead, what we're doing is we're killing civilians. We killed women and children in our bombing of Yemen. And then what we found out from the published chat, it wasn't a leak. For some reason, Jeffrey Goldberg was allowed into that chat, whether it was through foreign subterfuge that they, someone like Mossad, penetrated it and got him inserted, or whether he was consciously inserted by Michael Waltz, or that Waltz made a mistake and had him in his contacts and put him in. Regardless, what it reveals is there was nothing. The Yemenis had not done anything since the ceasefire was implemented in January as a result of Trump's intervention. They had not carried out any attacks because they were supporting the ceasefire. The only reason they had started attacking shipping was to try to put pressure on Israel to end the attacks on the Palestinians in Gaza. And let's remember, the Palestinians in Gaza are not all Muslim. There are many Christians there. That the U.S. government is enabling Israel to kill Christians. And we're also doing it in Syria. That's a whole nother story. But Uh, it showed cynically that there was no urgency to carry out this attack. It wasn't provoked by anything the Yemenis did. We chose to go kill some Yemenis. We are worshipers of the God of war.
Oh,
This is unfortunately our country is in the grips of this lust for war,
yeah.
and we're not willing to pursue peace.
And we've squandered all of our goodwill. We've squandered our moral integrity. We've squandered our family units because of
Yes.
all the PTSD and brokenness and injuries and
Yeah.
mental insanity through the generations that we've done these wars. We've plundered all of our wealth for nothing, decades and decades of stupid wars and proxy wars. And, we have, America is now like a fire sale where everything must go. And the renters of power are selling the last vestiges of, and yeah, it could go on for a while because there's a lot of momentum and everybody else is so much more hollowed out in comparison in the Western world, at least. But,
Well, let me let me
it's a
let
shame.
let me interject that many Christian Zionists, people like Mike Huckabee, have been completely bamboozled.
Yeah.
They have bought into the the Orthodox rabbinical view of God. The Jewish view of God is their particular vision of God is I would argue is actually demonic. Because what is their God? Their God wants human sacrifice or animal sacrifice. It's always about blood. In fact, it goes back to the very beginning that this rabbinical God rejected the gifts of fruits, the labor from a farmer, Cain, and rejected Cain for bringing fruits, but celebrated Abel for bringing dead animals that could be killed.
Yeah.
And this constant theme of killing, this God, this rabbinical God that is presented as the God, which I say is not, because it is totally in opposition to that which was represented by Jesus. Uh, this rabbinical God calls for the destruction of the Amalek, the murder of women, children, men, animals, kill them all, wipe them out.
Yeah.
And yet, the message that Jesus brings is one of let him who is without sin cast the first stone,
Yeah.
where he will deal with the Samaritan.
Yeah.
He will blessing and healing is not restricted just for the Jews.
Yeah.
It's for everybody. And that was what Saul of Tarsus came to understand in his conversion experience.
Yeah.
So, I think that there's some profundity in that, and unfortunately, we've got too many Christians embracing this Old Testament nonsense that this is God's desire for Israel to have and control that land and to kill all these people. No, it's not.
Yeah.
That is what you're buying into is some lies that were created by the people that wrote those books 2,500 years ago. It wasn't God did not sit down and dictate it to them.
Well, it's a misreading of what the biblical text is, because there's a way in which you can understand this stuff as uh, inspirational text, God inspired text that has an unreliable narrator sometimes, where it makes you wrestle with what's really being asked and what's really being said,
Yeah.
in the sense of making you wrestle with what's actually from God and what's from something that's wrong. So I do want to ask you about the your trip to Russia with
Yeah.
Lavrov. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that?
Sure. Was invited. This was my fourth trip. I had been a participant in the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in June of 2024, and then the International Russophile Conference that took place in February of 24. And so the opportunity came that the sponsors of the International Russophile movement, called the Tsargrad Institute, um, had submitted a request to the Kremlin to be able to conduct an interview with a select number of American bloggers and podcasters. And so I was invited along with a fellow named Mario Nafal, a young guy who posts largely on Twitter. He's a sort of a protege of Elon Musk, and then Judge Napolitano. And so traveled to Moscow. I arrived on a Thursday. We spent Friday touring a school that had been founded by the sponsor of our trip, a fellow named Konstantin Malofiev. And in this school, he is a committed Christian. The Russian Orthodox Christians, you know, a lot of Christians in America really don't understand the Eastern Orthodox movement. Yeah. And when you go back and look, it is, you know, it was really a split between the Catholics and the church in Constantinople over the nature of the Holy Spirit. Okay. You know, it's sort of a doctrinal dispute, but boy, out of that, they've gone off in two different directions. But anyway, there is a revival that has taken place in Russia, where they have embraced so firmly their Christian roots of the Orthodox movement. So we toured that. We toured the Victory Museum, which is one of the most incredible museums I've ever been in. It recounts Russia's victory from the start of the war to the end of the war over the Nazis in World War II, the Great Patriotic War. We did some more touring on Saturday. Judge and I got to travel outside of Moscow on Sunday to visit, of all things, a gun range, a shooting range that our host also owned. So we could see what that was like. And then on Monday, we met with Lavrov and first spent a half hour with his spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova. And Maria is a very competent, strong, intelligent diplomat in her own right. But the time with Lavrov was not controlled. We were not restricted in what questions we could ask. And we actually had a very, what I thought, open, free-flowing discussion. And I found Lavrov to be, he's well earned his title as sort of the dean of foreign ministers in the world. He is a superb diplomat. And I joked with him at the end that Metternich, a 19th century character, was always touted as the model for diplomacy. And I suggested to Lavrov that is wrong. I said that Metternich was the Lavrov of his era. And so he laughed at that.
Yeah. Well, what was your impression of Lavrov and generally your impression of the peace talks with the Trump administration while you were talking to him?
The Trump administration is not listening to the Russians. So Russia welcomes the chance to talk to the United States. They're very pleased that Trump is making that effort. But that said, they're no longer going to they're not going to surrender on key issues. And those key issues are, they're not going to agree to a ceasefire until the causes of the war are settled. And what are those causes? NATO expansion and NATO use of Ukraine as a military proxy to attack Russia. There has to be firm, settled guarantees on that. Reportedly, there was tentative agreement, but it appears that the Trump administration's balking at the agreement that was made Monday in Riyadh.
To not strike energy.
No, this is about opening the Black Sea again to grain shipments. Russia is willing to allow grain shipments both out of Russia and out of Ukraine, provided that, number one, all economic sanctions on Russia's shipment of grain and fertilizer is lifted. And two, Russia is going to inspect ships as they return to pick up grain when they pass through the Bosporus Straits and the Turkey controls. Russia's going to do the inspection to make sure they don't have weapons on board. Yeah. There can be other international observers present, but Russia's not going to let that be because previously they made an agreement allowed Turkey to do it, and then they realized Turkey couldn't be trusted. They got betrayed by Turkey.
So that looks like that's not going to hold, you're saying?
We'll see. Russia has laid out its position very clearly. The United States has not followed through on saying, okay, yeah, it's a deal. Let's go with it.
Did you see yourself in your role there as kind of like a citizen's effort uh, to broker a little step of dialogue and peace between the cultures of America and Russia using your media?
Yeah, yeah. My goal is more by speaking to Lavrov as I did. It does give me some credibility, at least should give me credibility here in the United States to say that I'm not just giving an opinion. I have spoken with Lavrov. I've read what Vladimir Putin said in June of 2024, and Lavrov has said what Putin said then still holds. We haven't changed one bit. And I've dealt with enough people over my lifetime that you know somebody when they're scamming you, and you know somebody when they're being genuine. And he was genuine, sincere. He is a serious man, but he's also capable of making fun of himself. But so I saw this as a way to doing what I can to try to promote a reconciliation, if you will, between the United States and Russia. But I'm swimming upstream because you look at all the major cable and regular television stations. They don't allow a single person to come on that could make the case about why Russia believes that it was forced into this military operation to protect itself.
Why is that?
It's media control. It's just like what the Soviets used to do when the Soviet Union was under the control of the communists. You restrict information. So
what's the media's agenda in being so
stay at war with Russia so we can keep pumping money into the defense establishment?
Yeah.
Notice they won't have John Mearsheimer on anymore, nor Jeffrey Sachs, nor Doug McGregor. McGregor used to be able to come on Tucker Carlson occasionally, but that's no longer allowed.
Yeah.
So other people that would have a voice, people like Matt Howe, a former State Department official and a Marine Corps officer who resigned in protest over the war in Afghanistan. So,
and I was sad that Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis couldn't join the DNI office with Tulsi. That wasn't a Senate position.
Sabotaged by the Zionists.
Yeah.
Again, the Zionists, too much of the U.S. foreign policy is under the control of these pro-Zionist fanatics. And they're not, they've, and this takes us off on another topic, but there is clear evidence out of these papers that were released on the JFK assassination that implicate Mossad in working with James Jesus Angleton at the CIA and the mafia, not just the Italian mafia, Carlos Marcello, but also the Jewish mafia, Meyer Lansky, to kill John F. Kennedy. And the reason was Kennedy was trying to stop Israel from getting a nuclear bomb. James Jesus Angleton, we learned in these papers that were just released, was contradicting, undermining, circumventing John F. Kennedy's policy. He was doing everything in his power to help Israel get the bomb. And we also learned that he was running a program called Operation Red Cap that involved recruiting relatively young members of the U.S. military to leave the military and defect and go to Russia. Gee, guess who one of those ones that were recruited into his program was? Guy named Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Ever heard of him?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you've got these pieces coming together. And here we are years later. We've had the Israeli attack on the USS Liberty, killing American sailors. So, it's not like this is an aberration. What Israel has no regard for America's interests. It's only interested in serving the interests of the Zionists.
Yeah.
And the Zionist interest is to eradicate the lands of all non-Jews, exterminate them if necessary, commit genocide,
You don't mean
And
around the world. You're talking about the ones that are in opposition to them and their greater Israel thing or
yeah,
whatever.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, those that live in Gaza, those that live in the West Bank. Remember, from the river to the sea, the Palestinians have said that, but the Jews also say that. I can show you Itamar or Bezalel Smotrich.
Yeah.
He says that without a problem, without blinking his eye.
What about
That's
the
what they,
Qataris? You hear about them, and Tucker seems to talk about them positively and so forth. What's that all about?
yeah, well, they're profiting upon providing America a presence. Uh, they're not Wahhabis. They don't have a Wahhabi streak within Qatar, but they do have the Al Udeid Air Force Base, which is our U.S. largest military base in the region,
Yeah.
and it's like 200, 300 miles from Iran,
Wow.
so it's close.
Now, Tulsi Gabbard as director of the DNI. So that uh, Tulsi said that there's no evidence of nukes, right? That Iran
Yeah,
had. Do you think
yeah.
that's a way of them signaling something there more than what we're seeing there? Is that
Well,
Tulsi
no.
trying to?
So the Ayatollah Khamenei issued a fatwa in 2003, 22 years ago, in which he said it is a sin against God for any Iranian to develop a nuclear weapon. That is the official Iranian position. That from a religious standpoint, it is a sin against God. On top of that, now we did have in place that JCPOA, the agreement that put the United States, China, Russia, I think it was France, the other one, in a position to monitor Iran's nuclear program, but Donald Trump blew that up, walked away from it. So now he's claiming to want to restart that, but what we do have in place is an agreement between Iran and Russia that was signed on January 17th. It's a security arrangement. And Russia made it very clear in there it's going to help Iran with its nuclear program, but it will not help Iran acquire a nuclear weapon, and in fact will work against Iran on that front.
Yeah.
So Russia's really at a place where it can actually guarantee that Iran's not working on a nuclear weapon and that Russia's not going to allow it to work on a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta understand the Iranian culture is extremely pro engineering. They pride themselves in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And engineering is for them what a doctor or a lawyer is in American society. It's like if you're an
Yes,
engineer,
yes.
you're a person of great reputation in your community. So their whole culture is geared towards that. So you would think that, for whatever, the opponents of them will say, oh, they have the right to lie and jihad to their opponents. So that's what they're doing there when they
Right,
say we
right.
don't have the right to do it. But even aside from that, there would be an argument that their culture would want to have nuclear energy for energy production as well, if
Yes.
they do want a weapon too. But frankly, I don't understand. Was it Iran that was stealing nuclear weapon technology from America back in the?
No, that was Israel.
Okay, well, was it Iran that was suggested was involved with the JFK assassination?
No, that was Israel.
So why are we trying to take out Iran's ability to have a nuclear weapon?
Because Israel wants us to. That's
Why did Israel want us to take out Pakistan's ability to have nukes? By the way,
uh,
they had Osama bin Laden right by their equivalent of the West
yeah,
Point, hanging out
yeah,
playing video games all day.
yeah,
What's going on with that?
yeah. No, we've Israel has never been. They don't see Pakistan as a direct threat, and
Why?
Pakistan has not been actively supporting Hamas or Hezbollah.
So what is it about Pakistan? What did they do to make a deal that makes Israel happy with them? I guess, but they're just itching to
Well,
take
well, it's
Iran down. What is
it's
it?
more that Pakistan's always made a deal with the United States to
Okay.
help the United States. Going back to 1960, 61, one of our U-2 bases, the plane, not the rock group, U-2
Yeah.
was based in Pakistan,
Yeah.
so it could overfly Russia.
Yeah.
And so this long relationship between the U.S. intelligence, CIA, my old outfit, the CIA, and
Oh, I
British. and Pakistani ISI.
I just remember why they want Iran to not have a nuke. 19 of the hijackers of 9/11 came from Iran, right?
Yeah, no, that would be the Saudis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you. I hope people appreciate your sarcasm there, David, because it is very funny. It's, you're making the critical point.
Yeah.
Uh, that
You
actually,
know what was the one nation, by the way, in the Middle East that had a candlelight vigil? Some people said 1 million people in the streets the day after 9/11 on solidarity with America.
well, it was either Syria or Iran.
It was Iran. Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't it amazing? That's the reward they get.
yeah.
The one
Well,
nation that
and
was in
and,
solidarity with America.
and who was it that was helping fight Al Qaeda slash ISIS in Syria?
Yeah.
That was Iran.
Wow.
That's who Iran was fighting. That's who Iran was killing.
Yeah.
The very people that killed our American citizens on 9/11.
And who has Jewish representation in their parliament? Iran or Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, that would be Iran.
That's right. What is this? These are things you don't hear on Fox News.
Yeah.
These are trivia that you don't hear on the cruise at Mike Huckabee's cruise during the Holy Land when he takes the people down there. He goes on these little cruises. They don't do these questions at trivia night there on the cruise. I guarantee you.
Well, again, if you buy in, there's a lot of money behind this.
Yeah.
The money that AIPAC has pumped in. In fact, one of the issues that was taking place prior to Kennedy's assassination was the Justice Department was insisting that the group now known as the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and I think their predecessor was called the American Zionist Committee, or Zionist Organization of America was sort of the bigger organization, that they hedged because they were a foreign agent pumping money in to influence American politics. Once Kennedy was killed, the pressure for them to register went away. Lyndon B. Johnson made sure of that. Johnson, it turns out, on his mother's side was Jewish. So by definition, he would be considered, Lyndon Baines Johnson was considered Jewish, and he was the one that started pumping arms and weapons into Israel on a massive scale. So, it was just to understand our history on this. But
what could Iran do to make a deal to make them in the good boy seat that Saudi Arabia and some of these other countries are for Israel and America? What would they literally have to do?
Destroy all their weapons, agree to not provide any more support to Hamas and Hezbollah, and get rid of the mullahs.
But Israel and U.S. gave Hamas more money than Iran has.
True.
So should we sanction ourselves?
Well, we should.
Should we sanction Israel until they stop funding Hamas?
You're trying to think rationally and logically about something that is irrational and illogical.
Yeah.
It really is. It's crazy. When you point out to people that with the creation of Hamas in 1987, that a Mossad immediately embarked on a program to provide financing to Hamas through Qatar. They used them as a cutout in order for Hamas to acquire weapons, in order for Hamas to be able to, if you will, fight against or oppose the Palestinian Authority. Israel's view was quite cynical. They wanted to have this opposition group exist so that it could prevent the serious consideration of a two-state solution.
Yeah.
And it was a successful operation in that sense.
Yeah. They wanted a rabid opponent versus something closer to Mr. Rogers. They didn't want that.
Correct.
So, that's the reality of the history there. So I always think to myself, if 50% of the population is under the age of 18 in Gaza, that means that at least 50% of the population was not even alive when the last time they had elections for Hamas.
Correct.
So who has moral accountability? Those children being killed in Gaza, or the people who funded, trained, equipped, and put Hamas on the map, including United States government and Israel?
Yeah.
It's just so morally insane.
Yes.
And America cannot be a free country, and it can't be make America great again until it has the ability to tell the truth about basic moral facts. If it can't do that, it won't have much of a success in the future.
No, I agree with you.
Well, Larry, I appreciate your time. We're sonar21.com is your website. Anything else you want to leave us with?
Nope, that's the place you come there. You can get to my Substacks. You can get to provide financial support if you wish. I'm happy to accept gifts, but there's no requirement. Nobody, I don't require you to pay to read.
Well, very good. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thanks, David. Always a pleasure, man.
Thank you.